Alrighty, y'all, so I'm not gonna lie to you. The morning after I watched Alien Romulus, I woke up and I had my breakfast, grabbed an orange and was peeling it back, and then immediately got grossed out because it sounded like the facehuggers and the xenomorphs from Alien Romulus. So, of course, I ate the orange and I am now checking my stomach. So at any point in this review, if you start hearing noises, call for help. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today I'm so excited to finally talk about my spoiler-free thoughts on Alien Romulus. A huge thank you to 20th Century Studios for giving me the chance to watch this in theaters for review. Now, I did see it in IMAX. Don't get me wrong, you don't have to see it in IMAX, but if you can, see it in IMAX or Dolby Cinema, because the sound design, the visuals, chef's kiss. Now, the film itself hits theaters on August 16th, which is this Friday, and it's rated R. And trust me, it's rated R for many things, including but not limited to aliens coming out of people's chests and stomachs. So yeah, don't eat food while watching this movie. That's all I'll say. Now, the movie itself is directed not by Ridley Scott, guys. It is Fede Alvarez, somebody who is a very well-known name in the horror space. Now, you know me, I'm not a big horror guy, but I do like a good thriller, and that's what this movie felt like for the most part, because I wasn't very scared, but he was the right man for the role. Now, the film itself has a cast that you've probably seen before. It's led by Cailee, Spaeny, who plays Rain, David Jonsson, who was in Rye Lane and is now starring here in Alien Romulus, and Isabela Merced, who, of course, is probably one of the most well-known names in this movie, if not the most well-known name in Alien Romulus. But y'all, I'm so excited to finally dive into this. Of course, before I do, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James. You found a good home for movies, TV, and all the news in between, so hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, y'all, and get loud in the comments, and you let me know. After seeing Alien Romulus, which Alien movie in the franchise is your favorite? And no, you can't name any of the Alien vs. Predator movies. They're awful. Alrighty, y'all, so if you don't know much, again, about Alien Romulus, I'll get into a little bit of a summary here. The film itself takes place chronologically between Alien and Aliens. We follow a new, young group of miners who are looking for their ticket off planet. When they discover a space outpost where they believe they can steal fuel, they end up finding much more than that, and now have to fight to save their lives. Hint, they find an alien, or 20, because it gets crazy when they get to that space outpost. But y'all, let's begin with my positives, because Alien Romulus, like I said in my social media reaction, man, it is the best movie in the franchise since Aliens, the second movie in the franchise. I recently rewatched all the Alien movies except for Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, but I'm confident in saying that Alien Romulus finally takes this franchise back to basics while still having a very fresh approach to this genre, and that's because of director Fede Alvarez and his solid view on what this franchise can be now and what it could be in the future, because there are some jumping off points, right? I can see where they're going to maybe go forward with the Alien franchise, but I love what he did in the director's chair. Instead of focusing on an insane amount of lore and being inundated with a ton of history, director Fede Alvarez sits down and says, alrighty, how do I make this a great horror and thriller film with a cast of humans and a lot of aliens? And he's very creative in his approach. He does take his time in the first act to give us some backstory on these characters without it feeling like a drag. And I really love that, because the first and second acts of this movie are great. We'll talk about the third act in a little bit, but what he does for the most part is allow the audience to kind of have their favorites, kind of get annoyed with some characters, but it all makes sense by the end. And I also like that he takes his approach from Don't Breathe and brings it in here too, in terms of the insane kills by these aliens. Let me tell y'all, it's crazy. And Alien Romulus would not have worked so well if it wasn't for a lot of harmonious connection between the VFX team, all the CGI, and even the music. So on a technical level, this movie's very impressive. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this review, I watched it in IMAX at my local AMC theater. So of course, it does add another layer to this film, but if you can't afford it, I do recommend it because it takes this film to that next level and you start to hear the sound design in ways you've never heard it before. There are certain noises in this movie that are a little haunting, you know? You walk out the theater and you're like, all right, bring up the house lights, please, quickly, because you start to keep it in your mind. I just think this film does such a good job with its sound design, but also its visuals. Outside of maybe one or two scenes, not a frame was wasted in the VFX department. Even the creature designs, guys, just incredible. The xenomorphs look great to me, and apparently, at times, they were animatronic. Yeah, according to director Fede Alvarez, he shared it on his X account, and I guess the early tests were with the animatronic xenomorphs. I wonder if they used those in the movie as well, but, you know, trust me, it was fire regardless. CGI or practical, this movie does so many things right on a technical level. But one of the things that blew me away, because if you know me, y'all, you know I love my music, and composer Benjamin Wallfish does something that this franchise has not seen before, which is provide an incredible score. I know, I'm a 90s baby, so I didn't grow up with the first two Aliens movies like most of you might have, but I will say, no movie in the Alien franchise had a score that I walked away and said, that was pretty good. No, in Alien Romulus, it's the first time I walked out of the theater thinking, this music is excellent, and when can I add it to my Apple Music account? We need it right now, Benjamin, now. But okay, you're wondering, we got good direction, got good technical elements, but what about the acting? Because it's true. In a lot of these Alien movies, the human characters sometimes are forgotten, especially in Prometheus and Alien Covenant. They're just terrible. But they're not terrible here in Alien Romulus. However, there are two standouts that are head and shoulders above the rest, in my opinion, and that's between David Jonsson and Cailee Spaeny. So let's begin bragging on David Jonsson a bit, because this man was incredible in Rye Lane. I loved his performance there. If you haven't seen it on Hulu, please go and watch it right now. But David Jonsson is probably going to be, for many people, the standout, and I've been seeing that among a lot of my fellow critics in this space. But what he does is play such a nuanced character named Andy, who's a synthetic, a robot, and he's got to do two things well, right? He's got to pretend, of course, that he is robotic in his movements and his emotion. But there are enough moments in this movie where he acts with his eyes in a way, and I'm like, whoa, you're showing a lot of range here. And it works so well. So he really balances both elements of his character perfectly, in my opinion. And also, he's got some really cool one-liners, I'm not gonna lie. And then there's Cailee Spaeny, right? So his co-star here. They're both peas in a pod in this movie, and you'll know what I mean when you watch it. But Cailee Spaeny plays Rain, a young character, a young woman who wants to go off planet. Both her parents are dead. She wants to go off planet and experience life, freedom, the sun. Girl, Wayland Industries ain't gonna let you do that. But her performance here in Alien Romulus, to me, is very reminiscent of Sigourney Weaver's in Alien and Aliens. She commands the screen when she needs to, and she has some awesome action hero moments in the third act too. Seriously, there are some elements. She's got the Colonial Marines assault rifle or whatever, and she's just like, who wants it? And I'm just like, it's so cool, guys, okay? She does have her moments, and you've already seen some of the promo images, and if you've seen the trailer, you've already seen one moment where the wind is blowing the xenomorphs in her face, and she is not backing down, and it's great. It makes for a fun time. So because of these two performances, the cast is that much better off. Everyone else, we'll talk about when we get into the next section, but for the most part, the acting here is decent to really good, thanks to both of these lead actors. Now, the last thing I do want to talk about in the positive section is the set pieces that we witness. My goodness, you guys. I thought, yeah, it's going to be nasty, but it is much more gut-wrenching than I expected. Fede Alvarez sat down and said, how do I freak out our audience and make them queasy? And he does it with facehuggers and the xenomorphs from start to finish. There's some scenes here that just blew my mind in terms of the design, right? You have facehuggers crawling around, and of course they gotta sneak through and they gotta be quiet, so they play with noise. And then there's another one, and I'm not gonna spoil anything, but I'll just say this: acid, blood, and zero gravity. That's it. It's really dope. And I'm not one to get scared very easily in movies anymore. I used to be a scaredy cat. I think I've gotten better, glory to God. But jump scares are effective in this movie, and I was kind of surprised. And it's because director Fede Alvarez does not cheapen those moments, you know, where we think, oh, of course, we're gonna get a typical jump scare here. We don't. Instead, it's kind of a surprise, and I like that. So again, it goes without saying, if you haven't seen any trailer, maybe you've only seen one, don't watch anymore. Go in as cold as possible, because when you see Alien Romulus for the first time, there are going to be plenty of surprises if you haven't already. Well, spoiled it for yourself. Alrighty, y'all. So, we've been raving about Alien Romulus for a little while now. It's time to get into the negatives, because this movie is flawed mainly in the third act. And this is going to be a hot topic of conversation when this movie drops to the general public this weekend, because the first two acts are going to appease many moviegoers, especially fans of the franchise. But it's the third act that takes a huge swing and, well, let's just say it maybe hits a single. You know what I mean? It doesn't hit a double or even an inside the park home run. This film kind of starts to go a little long in the third act. And then it introduces a big bad that I don't think was a good idea to introduce for as long as they did. I almost feel like the movie was losing its way just a little bit in the final 20 minutes. And yeah, they probably could have rethought this a little bit more. Listen, I'm not a director or a writer, so I wouldn't know how to approach it, but it would have been nice to have a bit of a tighter third act than what we got. It doesn't necessarily feel like an Alien movie for the final stretch, and that will probably make or break the experience for several fans, but hopefully you are able to overlook it like I did, because there's a lot of good in this film. So of course we have a third act that's a little heavy-handed, but it's not just the third act that had some of these flaws. I would say like right at the middle of the movie, like right when the middle of the film begins, they introduce us to someone. I'm not gonna say who, I'm not spoiling nothing, but let's just say the visual effect they used for this character and their entire face pulled me right out of the movie. And every time they showed him on screen, I thought, this is not clean. This looks bad. And I know bad is such a boring adjective, right? But I will be honest, there are times where I could see that maybe some elements of the CG just wasn't finished, or they didn't really think this one through, because the movements look so unnatural. So every time they go to this character and then they go back to our human characters, I just thought it was too much of a stark contrast. So it does break the immersion for me. So I was really hoping they might have inched away from that. Okay, so now I want to talk about the rest of the cast in Alien Romulus. We already mentioned Cailee Spaeny and David Jonsson are great in this film, but what about every other performance? Well, I hate to say it, but other than them, the rest of the cast is pretty bland and forgettable. The characters themselves don't have the best writing behind them, so they don't have as much support as David Jonsson and Cailee Spaeny, but I wish we maybe got a little bit more of a memorable time with these characters. Some of them are just playing a bland trope of the jerk or the traveler, the adventurer. You know, it just feels very by the numbers with the rest of the cast. So the supporting cast is pretty weak in that regard, unfortunately, and there wasn't really much of a takeaway. By the time the movie ended, I even forgot most of their names, because the film just doesn't do much of a good job at placing importance on the supporting cast. So at times they do tend to maybe drag the film down just a bit, but I don't think it's really their fault as much as it is the fault of the screenplay, because it kind of leaves them hanging out to dry sometimes. I will say though, who surprised me, and maybe not the best way possible, is Isabela Merced. Isabela Merced is an actress who I think is really talented. Really like her work, and everything I've seen her in, she's been really good. In this movie though, I feel like there were moments where I'm like, this wasn't her best. And that's not to say that she wasn't trying. I just think it's the genre, like this film genre, just doesn't really work for her very well. There were moments where I feel like she really wanted to break out, but scenes weren't calling for that. So I do think her performance disappointed me just a little bit, but overall the supporting cast just wasn't very memorable. But outside of those negatives, guys, and then when I think about my positives, I sat down and I thought, man, Alien Romulus is still a really solid movie. And it really is something special to see that it's the best since Aliens, because we've gotten a lot of fodder in between Aliens and now Alien Romulus. But this movie feels fresh for the most part. And Fede Alvarez is just someone who, when you give him the reins and let him take control and put his own spin on things, he does a good job at honoring the source material, but also providing something unique. So the experience does have a ton of fan service at times, but it worked. There were a lot of homages to Alien and Aliens, but I liked it because this is kind of an Alien movie for a new generation. So there are going to be a lot of first-time watchers, and now they're going to go back and watch Alien and Aliens. But Alien Romulus seriously does a lot well technically, and it has two great performances with David Jonsson and Cailee Spaeny. There are moments here that I will not forget this year, and among some of the best moments in, well, I should say this playground, the thriller horror genre playground. Again, I don't watch many horror movies, but this is a good thriller. It's a good time, and it feels like a nice end cap to summer. I almost feel like if this movie came out earlier this summer, it would have done even better. But here I am predicting things, right? I still think the movie's gonna make 500 million or more. This film is gonna crush at the box office, if not for the curiosity of new moviegoers and fans, or for the fans who want to see something that pays a lot of homage, again, to Aliens. But I do recommend seeing this movie. It is a good film, but not for the faint of heart, so please go in not eating Shake Shack or Five Guys. Especially no ketchup on your fries. It's not a good idea. But I would give this a solid 4 out of 5. I do think there's enough here for me to come away and say, if we got this level of quality with Prometheus and Alien Covenant, who knows where the franchise would be at this point. But y'all, there you have it. That's my real review of Alien Romulus. Again, a movie that I enjoyed, but I want to know, did you enjoy this film too? Hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments, because I want to know how you feel about Alien Romulus. Even if you didn't like it, that's okay. Tell me why. And then, well, I guess we can talk about whether I agree with that or not. But no, y'all, thank you so much again for tuning in and checking out my review of Alien Romulus. I really don't know what I'm going to eat for lunch now. Talking about all the chest bursting and the stomach stuff. I don't know. All right, well, I'm going to get going and figure that out. So again, thanks so much for watching. God bless you guys, and I'll catch you at the next screening.